Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The next portion of our discussion of Bayt al-Maqdis and Al-Quds has a great deal to do with one family, and that is the family of Yaqub alayhi salam. It would be good to familiarize ourselves a little bit with Yaqub alayhi salam and his family. I mentioned that Ishaq alayhi salam had two sons, Yaqub and Isu. Yaqub alayhi salam and his brother had a bit of a falling out, due to which his mother asked him to go back to Iraq, where her brother Laban lived, and spend some time there until his brother's anger had cooled down. And she also suggested that he get married there if he finds someone suitable. Yaqub alayhi salam goes there and he chooses to marry his uncle's daughter Rahil or Rachel. Now Laban had two daughters, Rachel and Leah. Yaqub alayhi salam preferred to marry Rachel, but at the last minute Laban switched his daughters on him, and when Yaqub alayhi salam discovered this and spoke to his father-in-law that how could you do this, he said that I do not follow this pattern of marrying a younger daughter before the elder one. That's why I gave you the elder one. And if you truly want to get married to Rachel, then you will pay a similar amount what you paid for Leah. So in other words, I married you off to Leah, even though you didn't necessarily want to get married with her, but now you have to stay with her. And the dowry, the mahar that Yaqub alayhi salam paid, was 7 years of service to his father-in-law, tending his sheep and so on and so forth. He said, if you want to marry Rachel, then you fulfill this duty, and then you give me 7 more years as a dowry for my other daughter, and you can marry her. And in their sharia, it was permissible for a man to marry sisters. So Yaqub alayhi salam lives his life there in Iraq at his uncle / father-in-law's place, looks after him, takes care of things, and now he starts having children. So Leah gives him first 4 sons, Rubail or Reuben, and then Sham'un or Simon, Lawi, also referred to as Levi or Levi, and lastly Judah or Yehuda. Now Rachel in the beginning is not able to have children, so she gives her slave. Now when Laban married each of his daughters off, at a gap of 7 years, he gave each of them one slave girl as a gift. So the slave girl that Leah received, her name was Zulfa or Zilpa, and the slave girl that Rachel received, her name was Bilha or Balha. Now when Rachel sees that she's not able to have children, she gifts her slave girl to Yaqub alayhi salam so he can have some children from her, and they would be considered Rachel's children because she was, after all, Rachel's slave girl, and Rachel would be in charge and responsible for those children. So Yaqub alayhi salam has 2 sons from Bilha, and when Leah sees this, now for some time she's unable to have children, so then Leah gifts her slave girl to Yaqub alayhi salam so that she can have some children on her behalf, like as a surrogate mother. So he's already had Dan and Naphtali from Bilha. So when he receives Zulfa, the slave girl of Leah, then he has Gad or Jad and Ashir. Meanwhile, Leah is able to conceive again, so she has now 2 sons, Issachar, also referred to as Yesjar, and another son, Zabulun or Ziyalun. So there are all of these sons. We have reached a total of 10 sons. Finally, Rachel is able to conceive. Now, I might add in between that some narrations mention, and Ibn Kathir rahimahullah has affirmed this as well, that Leah also had a daughter from Yaqub alayhi salam by the name of Dinah. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. But in any case, then Rachel is finally able to conceive, and she gives birth to Yusuf alayhi salam, and then a few years later she gives birth to Binyamin, and she passes away while delivering Binyamin. Now, Yaqub alayhi salam has spent some 20 years or so looking after his father-in-law's estate, his animals, and so on and so forth. He decides to come back, and this is when he settles at Shechem. And he makes up with his brother. His brother is fine, he allows him to stay there, and this is now the Alu Yaqub. Now, initially that place that he had settled to, Shechem or Shechem, as it is referred to in Arabic, there was a person who lived there who kidnapped Dinah. And he kidnapped her, took her, and then demanded from her brothers that they allow him to marry her. So he kept her as a captive and said, I want you to marry your sister to me. So the brothers came up with a plan. They said, okay, fine, you can marry her, but first you have to get circumcised. You and all the men that are around you, your commanders and so on, if all of you get circumcised, then we'll let you marry our sister. So that man, who incidentally his name was also Shechem, he got himself circumcised, got his men circumcised. So while they were there recovering and in pain from this procedure, Yaqub alayhi salam's sons went, killed them all, rescued their sister, and brought her back. And we do not hear any other mention about Dinah besides this incident. Now, you are very familiar with the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail, but ultimately Yusuf alayhi salam is thrown into a well. He is the target of the jealousy and the plots of his brothers. They feel that Yaqub alayhi salam is giving him excessive attention, and they feel this is going to hurt their interests and harm them in significant ways. So they make a plan to get rid of him. Yusuf alayhi salam is rescued from the well by a passing caravan, and he ends up in Egypt. He goes through all of these ordeals with Zulaykha, with going to jail, and then through his mastery in dream interpretation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rescues him from the jail and puts him at the top of Egypt as a ruler. And now the same brothers that had plotted against him are coming to him for help, coming to him for food. Some historians say that during this time, during the time that Yusuf alayhi salam had moved to Egypt, and decades passed during this, during the course of these events, Egyptian rulers had taken over the land of Canaan, that land of Palestine. They had taken it over possibly in an administrative capacity, or it was serving as a vassal state for Egypt. And they say that this is why the Canaaniyin had to come to Egypt to seek food. This is something that is mentioned by historians in the literature. In any case, after the whole story with his brothers reaches its final conclusion, Yusuf alayhi salam forgives his brothers, and he sends his shirt through one of his brothers to Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub alayhi salam, who by now has become blind, has his eyesight restored, and Yusuf alayhi salam says, "Wa'tuni bi ahlikum ajma'in." I want you to bring all of your family. So all of the family means that these brothers, their wives, their children, Yaqub alayhi salam, anyone who is in their family circle must now come to Egypt. They come to Egypt. Yusuf alayhi salam honors his parents, treats his brothers with a lot of respect, has them settle down, and in a very short time, these people become the elite class and the ruling class of Egypt. So this is Banu Israel, the 12 sons of Yaqub alayhi salam, and Yaqub alayhi salam himself is Israel. His other name is Israel. Narrations mention that an angel came, and that angel told him that from now on you will be called Israel. So from each of the sons of Israel, each of the sons of Yaqub alayhi salam, there were great progenies, many children. They all had huge families. In fact, each family then formed a tribe in and of itself. These are the 12 tribes of the Israelites, the 12 tribes of Bani Israel. And Yusuf alayhi salam left them in a wonderful, prosperous condition. But after a few generations, things began to change. When their deeds changed and they took things for granted and they stopped obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a lot of things changed, and those same people who were the ruling class of Egypt now became enslaved by the new generation of pharaohs, of kings that came into power. They enslaved them, they punished them, tortured them, committed infanticide, would kill all of the male offspring every second year. All of this is well known until the time of Musa alayhi salam. And the persecution continues. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises Musa alayhi salam, grants him prophethood, and Musa alayhi salam leaves for a short time, goes to Madian, comes back, and he has a message for Fir'aun. And the struggle and the conflict between Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun begins. Bani Israel continues to be persecuted, and Musa alayhi salam on one side works to look after Bani Israel, also to teach them, to reform them, to spark faith in them, and also has to face the forces of Fir'aun and the torment of Fir'aun. And this is where some incredible events happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows His signs through Musa alayhi salam, through the prayers of Musa alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows 9 consecutive signs, meaning different forms of punishment. Fir'aun and his people see this. Each time they are devastated by one of these small inflictions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing them, so that they come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the storms, the infestation by locusts, the blood in the drinking water, the bed bugs or the ticks, and all of these signs. في 9 آيات, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows him 9 signs. He still doesn't come around. Eventually, then the greatest sign comes, and that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drowns Fir'aun in the same water through which He allows Bani Israel, Musa alayhi salam, and his followers to cross on dry land. And as you know, the sea closes in on Fir'aun and his people. They're destroyed. 10 major signs. Now, just as all of this has happened, Musa alayhi salam gives them the directive that we now have to go to Al-Ard Al-Muqaddasa, to the sacred land. And in the next section, inshallah, we'll talk about how that happened.